Do you like trips and travel? Do you like riding planes? So what would you do if the plane left you from somewhere to take you to your destination, but after 35 years? And not only that, but you will not arrive in the same state in which you traveled, and you are a skeleton. Yes. When the plane landed, it was carrying nothing but skeletons? Good. We will discover all this and more together through the following investigation of Flight 513 Santiago. According to a 1989 article in the tabloid Weekly World News, Santiago Airlines Flight 513 took off on September 4, 1954, from Aachen, West Germany, and was scheduled to arrive in Porto Alegre, Brazil, 18 hours later. However, the plane simply disappeared. In the middle of the flight over the Atlantic Ocean, the authorities believed that it had crashed. Over the following years, multiple teams were formed to search for the remains of the passengers or the plane, but nothing was found. Time passed and decades passed, and the company Santiago Airlines had already ended its work in the year 1956, just 2 years after the plane disappeared, and after failing to find any trace of its crash, the search was called off. After 35 years at Porto Alegre Airport in Brazil, specifically on October 12, 1989, the control tower reported that there was a plane hovering around the airport. Air traffic officials tried to contact the pilot but did not receive any response. Then the plane approached the runway and landed perfectly. Initially, the authorities asked to know why its pilot arrived without warning, but when they approached the plane, they noticed its age and were puzzled when they discovered that it belonged to Santiago Airlines, an airline that closed its doors in 1956, and that this plane was the missing Flight 513. 35 years ago, and it looked in very good condition from the outside, and the engines were still running, despite touching the base. So airport officials and controllers moved to examine the plane from the inside and find out what exactly was happening. After the surprise of the plane's return, airport officials were waiting for other, more strange surprises. After they opened the plane's doors, the officials were surprised to find 92 perfectly preserved skeletons of the people on board, 88 passengers and 4 crew members, safely in their seats, with belts on and in a state of alert, to land. And that was not the only surprise. When the cockpit was opened, the officials were surprised by another surprise, more frightening than the previous one, when they saw that the pilot of the plane, Captain Miguel Victor Corey, was also in the form of a skeleton, and his hands were still on the plane's controls. So who landed the plane? While the Brazilian government investigated this strange event, it refused to offer any explanations or theories, let alone draw any conclusions. And all officials eventually admitted that the plane suddenly appeared in the sky and landed successfully, and the lack of response, which is interpreted as secrecy, from the government sparked public anger over the years, and Rodrigo de Manha, a former physics professor in Porto Alegre, said, "The public has the right to know everything about this plane, and the government has a duty to tell them." Spokesmen like Manha were joined by others and demanded full disclosure, including Dr. Celso Attilo, a paranormal researcher, who has speculated that the government is actually hiding concrete evidence of the existence of wormholes, and that the plane has been lost in one for more than 3 decades, even though Santiago Airlines has ended its operations. It closed its doors, but its executive directors, who were still alive, said they did not know much about that trip and had no comment. The only explanation that has emerged about the plane is the explanation announced by Dr. Celso Attilo, a researcher in the paranormal, who said that Santiago Flight 513 had definitely entered a period of time warp, or what is known as a wormhole, which is a time warp capable of pulling individuals, objects, and even time and air. But Dr. Attilo did not find an explanation for the plane landing with a skeleton pilot. He said, "It was piloted by the skeleton of the captain, and all the crew members and the passengers had also died." Officials do not want to discuss explanations, but they cannot deny that this plane had defied the laws of the plane, space and time, and only God knows how the skeleton was able to bring it down. In the end, that story was discredited, especially since there were no sources of information about it other than that article. It was claimed that this newspaper used to publish false news related to the paranormal to attract readers. Some incidents similar to that incident were cited, which were later published, but they did not receive the same resonance and did not. Its passengers return by plane. Its passengers return by plane after 35 years, and they are skeletons. No one can deny the repeated disappearance of some planes and ships without any trace or evidence of their crashing, sinking, or even bad weather conditions. So where are they disappearing? In the end, dear reader, the mystery of Flight 513 remains mysterious and has no explanation. Is it real? Goodbye. And be careful.